Hey, I am Rob, and this is the basics of YAML. Let's take a look. Now, YAML is all about key value pairs, and the values can take on a variety of types. So this is a string. String can be anything. Supported types also include numbers or Boolean values or the null value, which you don't actually have to specify. You can omit, and it just accepts that as null. Now, those are all the types that are single types in and of themselves, but there are also container types. That is, there are types that can contain other elements. Those types are the list type, like so, or the map type, which is what's called an associative array, which is just computer science speak for key value pairs. So there are two collections, and I have expressed them using what YAML calls the flow style. That means I have encapsulated them in parentheses, square parens for the list and curly parens for the map. But YAML supports another way of describing the collection types, and that is what they call block style. So for lists, you can express that with white space and dashes, and you see that in JSON, the representation comes up the same. And for a map, you just express that with white space. You don't need the dashes. And so these expressions here are also equivalent. So far, so good, but it gets more complicated, of course, because collection types can be nested. That is, you can have a list of lists. So here I have a list that contains two elements, and each element of the list is another list that contains two strings, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this can be expressed in block style. So these expressions are also equivalent. You can do this with not just a list of lists. You can do this with a list of maps as well. So here, the first element in my list is a map containing the key value pairs, mapping the string 1 to the number 1 and the string 2 to the number 2. And the second element in this list is a map containing a single key value pair, mapping the string 3 to the number 3. Now, in flow style, if you have a list element that is a mapping with only a single key value pair inside of it, you can omit the parentheses and that will be accepted. However, that is only for crazy people and it makes you an objectively bad person. Please don't do that. You can, however, express this list of maps in block style as well. And so these expressions are equivalent as well. And one bit here that tends to trip people up sometimes when they are coming to YAML for the first time is there's some uncertainty about where to put the dashes when you have a list of maps. So the rule here is that if you want to add a new element to this map, so that is, I have this list, it contains the first element is a map with two key value pairs, second element in the list is a map with one key value pair. If I want to add a third element to this map, I do so without a leading dash. If I want to add a third element to the list, then I add the dash. Now, for completeness, we can also express a map of maps. So I'm mapping the string 1 to a value which is also a map. I'm mapping the key 2 to another map. And this can be expressed in block style as well. So those are equivalent. Now, in my opinion, this is YAML's attempt to follow the old maxim that code should be written first for people to read and only incidentally for machines. To my eyes, the block style is more readable than the flow style for this type of nested structure, especially when the number of elements gets quite large. Finally, we can express a map of lists. So here I am setting the key 1 to the value of a list that contains 2 strings, A and B, and the key 2 to the value of a list that contains the strings C and D. And of course, this can be expressed in block style as well. Now, another thing that trips people up when they are new to YAML is the amount of indentation that a map which contains a list in block style requires. So you'll see people playing around, moving things over like this. And the truth is that YAML doesn't care how far you indent these objects. You see every time I save, nothing changes on this side. And that's because as long as all items in the list are indented the same amount, you're fine. Where you get into trouble is if you have 2 different elements indented a different amount, then you get a parse error. So as long as you are indented the same amount, you're fine. So that is a quick and dirty YAML intro. Check out our next video for a short primer on Kubernetes YAML documents. Thanks.